Hello, it's me again. We're back on page 100 at the bottom when you are ready. But when Odysseus, sickened by their horseplay, told them that they would be wise to go home and stay there, unless the master of the house should return to find them making a pigsty of his hall, they turned ugly, and one of them, Eurymachus, by name, flung a stool at him, which missed him as he ducked and hit one of the cupbearers instead, spilling the great mixing bowl of wine, and all was uproar. What again? Because what do we know about men in this book? They like wine. And this man just threw a stool at Odysseus. Odysseus ducked real quick, and so the stool hit the cupbearer, which in ancient Greece, a cupbearer was just like the person who was always on standby with like drinks ready, like just in a big vase. So they're not too happy now. At last, the young men, sleepy with much food and drink, reeled away to their own sleeping places in the town. Then Odysseus and his son took down the fine weapons from the walls and carried them away to one of the storerooms below the house. And when they had been safely hidden away, Telemachus went off to sleep in his own chamber, which opened onto the inner courtyard. But Odysseus sat in the darkening hall where the fires were burning low and waited for Penelope to come. Her maidens came first, trooping and laughing and chattering among themselves to clear the remains of the feast. So Penelope's maidens, those are like her girls, right? Those are her friends. They were startled to find the old beggar man still sitting there, and one of them, Melanantho, tried to shoo him out as though he had been something strayed in from the farmyard, threatening him with a shower of torches round his ears. But Penelope, entering close behind, heard this and scolded her, ordering the fire to be made up in the central hearth and a chair set aside for him beside it. The word hearth keeps coming up. I'm kind of tired of it. Just say fireplace. Okay, that's my own opinion. Back to the story. And when he was seated and the maidens had gone back to their own quarters, she sat down in top of 102. She sat down in her own chair, spread with milky ram skins, and began to question him as to who he was and where he came from. Not being ready to tell her the truth, he told her another of his stories, how he was a Cretan prince who had not sailed with the black ships, sailed with the black ships, and how Odysseus had been his guest on his way to Troy, while repairs were made to some of his fleet that had been damaged in a storm. Penelope wept to hear even such ancient news, but many false stories had been told to her by strangers in the years gone by. So to test them, she said, "Tell me, how was my lord dressed? For I long to hear all there is to hear about him." Odysseus smiled within himself, but he answered her seriously enough. He wore a double cloak of purple, held at the shoulder by a brooch, with 2 sheathed pins to it, and a brooch fashioned like a hunting dog holding down a struggling fawn, and beneath his cloak was a silken tunic smoothed as inner skin a peeled onion. And Penelope, she wept afresh, for she had given that pin and the cloak and the tunic to her lord at his setting out. "Nay," said Odysseus, "no more tears, lady, for in these later wanderings that ill fortune has brought upon me, I've heard again of Odysseus, how he still lives, he alone of all his company, and is on his way home to you even now." Penelope dared not to let herself believe, for she had believed too many times before, but she could not refuse the hope that he brought her, either. So in gratitude, she called up Eurycleia, the old nurse, Eurycleia, we'll go with that, the old nurse, and bade her bring warm water and bathe the stranger's feet, which were dust-caked and chapped with long journeying. Seeing who it was, when she brought the bowl, Odysseus drew back a little and turned his face from the firelight. "Foolish old woman that I am," Eurycleia mumbled softly through toothless gums, "I do this gladly for the sake of my old master, who may have sorely needed some woman to do the same for him in a foreign land. Indeed, clean and freshly clad, it is in my mind that you might look much as he used to. Aye, you have the look, even your hands and feet." "Others who have seen us both have said much the same thing," Odysseus said quickly. But in the same instant she broke off her mumbling, looking down as she pushed his rags aside at the long white scar that began just above his knee, ran out toward his hip, the scar of a boar's tusk, gained on the hunting trail when he was little more than a boy. Eurycleia recognized the old wound immediately, because this woman, the nurse, did you catch on? She's real old. Like, she doesn't even have teeth. It says toothless gums. This woman is the woman who raised Odysseus, right? I don't know about you, But my mama, she knows me very well. So even if I was in disguise, she would probably be able to figure it out. And Odysseus does not want that to happen. But here on 103, at the bottom, we see, "Oh, my child," she whispered. "Oh, my master." She was the second as Argus had been the first to know him again in Beggar's guise. She let his foot, top of 104, she let his foot fall back with a splash into the water and was already turning her mouth open to crowd the glad news to Penelope, sitting close by. But Athena had drawn the queen's thoughts away from what was happening beside the hearth, for it was not yet time for her to know the truth. And Odysseus set his hand on the old woman's throat, while with the other he drew closer. "Silence, old nurse. Would you be the death of me?" And looking at him, she understood and nodded. "Silent as a stone, my dearie." And with shaking hands, she went on with her task. When she had bathed his feet and rubbed them with oil and had gone her way bearing the basin with her, Penelope turned to the stranger again and began to tell him of her sorrows, and how if Odysseus did not soon return, she must yield at last and take one of the suitors for her new lord. But how could she choose among them, when in truth she wanted none? "Call a contest of some kind," Odysseus said harshly, "and give yourself to the winner." She made no reply at first, paying great attention to her spinning. But in a while, she let the spindle fall idle and looked up. "Pause for a minute. Penelope's sewing. And in the past, what have we associated spinning with when we think about ancient Greek women?" Interesting. Back on 104. "My lord's own bow is still in the house," she said. "A great bow that few men but he can draw. In his young days, I recall, he would sometimes take 12 of the axe rings that men use for target practice in games of bowmanship, set them up in a row, and shoot an arrow straight through all 12 for a show of skill. So I will make my contest, and whichever man can best string my lord's bow and lose his shafts through the ranged axe rings, that man I will take for my new lord, and him I will go with, bidding farewell to this house that has been my home since I came to it as a bride." "Then hold the contest tomorrow," Odysseus said. "Even so, it is in my mind that Odysseus himself may well be here before a lesser man can draw his bow." Penelope gave him a long look, then rose and left the hall, climbing to her own chamber where her bower woman awaited her. Oop, we're pausing. So what's about to happen? He's like, okay, you want to give up and not wait for Odysseus, and you don't know who to choose. Have a little contest. See who can use Odysseus's bow and arrow and get like the most bullseyes, right? Like use it the best. But his plan is probably what? What do you think it is? Because she said only Odysseus could ever use this bow and arrow. Maybe a little foreshadowing. I don't know, though. That's just me. Okay, we are pausing. You are responsible for this work today. You will have a do now quiz tomorrow. There is more than enough time. At this point, there's been about 14 minutes of reading, and now you have the rest of the time to finish up those questions. Please type in complete sentences. You may work together. That does not mean copy each other. That means discuss what you think about the questions and put it in your own words. Mwah. Thank you. Peace. See you tomorrow. I'm tapping out for the night.